Okay, last week of September, I did go to the thrift store today. My logic being that the first day of October this year is a Saturday. Saturdays, the entire thrift store is half off. The first Saturday of the month, the entire store is half off. And usually that first week after that first Saturday, the store is just still so picked over, there's nothing there. So I thought, alright, I'll go this week and I won't go next week. That'll be the same amount of weeks giving the thrift store overall. And, whew, if I thought it was going to be picked over next week, it was bad today. If I went to two stores. I got, for the child, a BB-8 cereal toy that you look through and see a picture of BB-8. He actually did want this. We got the cereal once, it was the mouse droid in it. Although we can't help but think when we look through this to see the picture, you know, that's how people used to carry their porn with them. Keychains, eye holes, magnifications, backlit slides. So we think of these as the droid porn hods, but the child doesn't, so he gets his BB-8. The other thing I found, that's it, I only found two things, two thrift stores, after not having gone for 3 weeks, found two things. So I won't mind not going next week, and I still feel kind of like I kept to my whole not buying dolls and not buying cloth this month thing. But I did get some Halloween stickers, some cute Halloween stickers. So, but that's all I got in the thrift store. So I will be working on more projects with the doll things I have because I have lots of things to work on projects with. And projects that I have been working on, well, last time John sent me a packet of doll stuff, some great dolls, and also a little bit of Halloween cloth that I had been saving. I cut out the cloth to make a little A-line dress for Barbie-sized dolls. I haven't sewn that yet, but I did use the rest of the cloth to make a dress for my Disney Animator Cinderella doll. I like her wild hair. My hair when I was a kid was not curly, but it was pretty much this blonde and this messy all the time. I did paint her eyes to be brown, because you can't have too many brown-eyed dolls. And also when I was a little kid with messy blonde hair, I still had brown eyes. I didn't have glasses when I was little, but I'm not saying this is my vicariously living me doll. I'm just saying blonde hair, brown eyes, glasses, no problem with that. So this is the cloth John sent. It's a really cute Halloween print. There's lots of really cute characters all over it. See the mummy and another Cyclops girl back here. Cyclops girl and a Frankenstein who has no pants. Frankenstein's monster. And, oh, there went the mail. We'll see. I did order some epoxy putty. I used the last of the epoxy putty that I had, and I finally ordered some, and it's supposed to be out for delivery today, so the mail might have dropped my epoxy putty off right then. I will go look later. But, anyway, so I used the last, I didn't quite have enough of this fabric left, so I did a contrast eyelet underlined with light blue in the back. And this is a little bit of Clooney lace that I'd had little scraps of sewed together to make it just long enough to be the trim on the edge. And then this was some thrifted woven embroidered type trim. So anyway, clothes for the Disney Animator doll. There's always stuff stuck in her hair too. Sorry. I'm kind of unfocused today, aren't I? But I always am. I don't usually look at the back of the doll, so who knows how long that hair has been in there. Cat hair, cat hair, cat hair. Yeah, I just ate a caramel apple, so even though they say that sugar doesn't actually get you wound up, I feel like I have a bit of a sugar buzz. So anyway, there's that. And one of the projects that I showed you a while ago was the Dracula body with the off-brand pink doll head that I'd acetone shrunk, broke the top a little bit, and I said I was going to try to give her like a robot look, and John said, no, try giving her a galaxy look. So I did try that. I don't think she looks terribly pastel galaxy, but it is an interesting look, kind of like a pastel stone. And like I said, I used the last of my epoxy putty to do her hair and do the hair on the shrunken headed Jinafire custom, which I will show in a moment. I really don't feel like there's a lot to say about this doll. I did play around with the sponge and just kept sponging on layer after layer after layer of color, and that might have been, I might have gone too far with it. That might be why her head looks more like a rock than like the cosmos. I did do a layer of splattering white paint off of a toothbrush to look more like stars. And then I'm not sure if it's visible here. I do have pictures of her on Flickr as usual, as well as all these other dolls. I coated her entirely with glitter glue with iridescent glitter in it. So she does have sparkles, iridescent sparkles. And yeah, that's this doll. The shoes she's wearing are from the MGA, America's Next Top Model dolls. You see they're not quite right height on the heel, but they are wide enough. And I did put a wash on them to bring out the details, because a lot of what I did to this Jinafire custom involved putting a wash on the body to bring out details. So like I said, I used the very last bit of epoxy putty I had. First I sculpted her hair, and then I thought, do I have enough left to do her hair? So I squeezed and squished and rolled it out. The most important thing was there was a big crack that went from the top of her head all the way down next to her ear, and that is covered on this side of her headpiece, helmet, robot hair, I'm not sure what it is. And then little bits and bobs that got cut off when I was shaving that, I stuck on the side here. So yeah, she's some sort of robot. If you recall, this Jinafire body that I thrifted did not have an arm, but a few weeks after that I thrifted a Cleoli arm, and only the arm. That was the correct side, so I put the peach arm with the golden gloves on the gold body. I thought it worked, so I used that peach as my jumping off point. Well, there is a wrap on the arm. I painted that gold by putting down a base of a sort of light brown and then painting the gold on top of it. It actually matched fairly well. That's also how I painted the hair. But then I ended up with the hair after I did the brown with the gold on top. Then I put a pearlescent coat, and that made it very almost platinum looking. It's not a bad look. But I took the idea of the peach color from this arm, and I painted alternating sections of her torso scales with it, and also her eyes. And then for accent I did the dark green, outlining things, and this, whatever this is, on the side of her head and her lips, and also the studs on the gloves I did in the green, but it's kind of hard to see that. And then I went down and raided my husband's wargame painting supplies, wargame miniatures painting supplies. And first I put on the same sort of red wash that I used on these shoes. And it was nice, but it wasn't as dramatic or old and run down as I'd wanted. So I asked him to recommend a darker wash, and he came up with something that was, I believe, just called Dark Wash. And if you're not familiar with washes, they have a different surface tension than just paint and water. So that when you paint them over plastic or something painted, they pool, they gather and collect in the low-lying areas. So all the texture, and when I sculpted this, I had it sculpted and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I just looked at my sculpting tools, and a lot of them had textures on their handles. So I just started rolling those around and stamping them down in. I also stamped this in a few places just because it was there. And to give texture to the putty on her head. So that texture got brought out with the wash, and the texture of her scales I think got brought out very nicely. And I initially was very cautious with the way I did the wash in her face, but then I just went overboard with it because I want her to look kind of grungy, grimy, and old. I won't exactly say steampunk, because we all know that Monster High Rebecca is the steampunk robot. But, so now for whatever reason I have a old brass and copper dragon robot for my dolls. And then my last doll project was, I think I showed you that little Big Eyes last week, where I had enlarged the neck opening so I could put the head on the vintage doll body that was strung together with elastic. So I've been planning to enhance her eye chips and redo her face paint, but I didn't know when I would do that, so I just kind of impulsively, spur of the moment, did that on Saturday and Sunday. With a little bit on Monday, because Sunday someone was here playing war games in the basement and I didn't want to go down to use the airbrush and talk to the person. Not because I don't like the person, just because I'm not the most social person. I didn't want to deal with any smart aleck remarks because I was wearing this shirt I made from troll print fabric. And it is a tacky, obnoxious shirt that I don't usually wear where other people who don't know me really well can see it, because I don't want to deal with the smart aleck remarks from people who aren't my kind of smart aleck. Anyway, so yeah, I did more work on the little Big Eyes doll. First I used the magic eraser to remove her original eyebrows and most of her lip paint, and then I used 1600 grit sandpaper, is it 1600 or 800, to sand matte her face. And then I put some silly putty around her mouth, following the contours of her lips to create a mask for the airbrush. That's something you can do. Usually it's not very precise. A lot of people will, like when they're painting their war game miniatures, to make an improvised camouflage pattern, they'll put down blobs of silly putty, airbrush over that, take those off, put down other blobs, airbrush over that, and it does build up. I have done a doll a few years ago, a customized Kern doll called Obedient Child. I gave her sort of Chinese opera makeup, and I masked her face off, the red and the white, with using silly putty for that. So I have done silly putty masking in dolls before, but not a lot. So this was an experiment to shave it around her lips. Unfortunately, I hadn't sanded the face enough so that when I got down there and hit it with the airbrush, the paint didn't stick, it just kind of pooled up. So I dabbed that off and removed the silly putty. And fortunately, it did leave a nice outline for the lips, and they were a lovely shape, as you can probably see. A little bit more like Blythe lips, although I did not do that on purpose, and not as wide and precisely following the sculpt as the original little Big Eyes lips. So after I did successfully airbrush her blush on her cheeks and some, again, I got into husband's wargaming paints as airbrush colors, some gunmetal very lightly on her eyeshadow, also on her eyelids, but it is scraping off whenever her eye mechanism still doesn't work completely, although it does work for changing from orange to blue, I think. But just pressing it and closing it, I did get a scrape on her eyelids. But that's okay, because I'm not usually going to have her eyes closed. So yeah, to protect that paint, I ended up putting a coat of Purity Seal on it. Again, that's also borrowed from Husband's War Painting Supplies. So she is both sand matted and spray matted, and that does give her a very soft, non-shiny matte appearance to her face, which does improve these dolls, I think. And then when that was dry, I did a gloss coat on her lips. It's not super glossy, but it is just a slightly different sheen from the rest of her face. As far as her eyes go, when I pried out her eye chips, I found that they are sort of the opposite of Blythe eye chips. If you have experience with Blythe eye chips, you know that they have a little nub on the back, and you can dip that nub into black paint, and that gives her solid black pupils because of the way the optics funnel the black through to the front of the eye. Not these dolls. These dolls have the eye chip, and then there's sort of a cylindrical well in the back, and there's a little piece of black plastic pushed into that cylindrical well. And that's what forms the pupil of these eyes. What I did for all of the eyes is I used my dropper bottle of Vallejo Game Color Black and dropped paint into the eye well where the pupil is, spread that around, then I stuck the little black pieces of plastic back inside. And that, it's still not a perfectly dark pupil like Blythe's have. You can still see the plastic in front of it, but they are an improvement over what they had before. However, since I was making it up as I went along, it's not perfect. Some of the eyes, orange especially, you can see textures in the paint inside, and some of them had little round molding marks inside. The green, you can really see that. And again, I do have pictures of all of her eye chips on Flickr. Link will be below. Link is always below. Even if I don't say the link is below for Flickr, it is. And so that's how I dealt with her pupils. And then I traced around the eye chips and cut circles out of some holographic foil sticker paper sheets with a sort of glitter texture that I've had for ages. I bought them years ago on Closeout and Big Lots, and they're you can print on them with an inkjet printer. I've actually given a lot of them away because I bought so many packages, and whenever I have found a use for them, it's just been little tiny, like, eye chip size. So since these don't have the nub that sticks out, I didn't have to cut a hole in the center of them like when I did Blythe eye chips. So I just cut really rough circles, put them in the eye well, and then put the eye chips back in. I'm pretty sure these eye chips were originally just friction fit, but the green was very loose, and so I just touched a dot of plastic weld to the edge, just one dot on the edge of each of the eyes. I don't know if the residue I'm seeing on top of the eyes is from the plastic weld, or if it's, a lot of these eye chips were not made terribly well, and I really do need to go through and shine them up, whether that's from the plastic weld or from their weird manufacturing process. Some of them aren't even quite the same color from one side to one eye to the other. Like the green especially, are slightly different shades of green. But if I polish them up, that might help things. And her eyelashes, I thrifted a set of fake eyelashes for like 49 cents once upon a time, specifically for doll use. Cut one of those in half, put them on, put half on each eye. I taped them in because the Little Big Eyes eyelashes were just originally held in with masking tape, although I got fancy, I used washi tape. And yeah, I was just amazed after I put the head back together, what a difference all the little changes. And they are little changes. I know I just rambled for however long about all the changes I made, but really I just darkened the pupils, foiled the eyes, matted the skin, and gave her makeup, different makeup. It's amazing how all those added up to make her look fairly different from the original Little Big Eyes look. I did also put some non-skid shelf liner inside the top of her neck, inside her head, to help combat the floppiness of the head. And it worked pretty well. So well that I decided to give her a heavier wig than the one she'd had before, that little short black wig. I gave her this brown wig that was stolen off of a broken thrifted porcelain doll. And so her head got a little floppy again from the weight of the wig, but overall, being as this was made from a couple broken dolls put together, I think she worked out pretty well. And I'm going to go see if the mailman brought my epoxy putty. See you next week.